Hello everybody and welcome back to another not applicable Formula 1 video. I hope that you're well. It's finally February and we're going to see some Formula 1 cars very soon. But before that, what I thought we'd do today is talk about the Formula 1 drivers' wages over the course of the season and whether or not some of these drivers are a little bit overpaid or maybe even underpaid, and you can decide in the comments at the end of the video. Let's delve into it. We'll start at the bottom and work our way up. And actually, starting at the bottom takes us to Yuki Tsunoda, who is the only driver who isn't paid over $1 million for the season. Only $750,000. And only in Formula 1 can you say the words only $750,000. Like, that is an insane amount of money. But Yuki Tsunoda finds himself at the bottom of the list. His contract expiring at the end of this year, although AlphaTauri do have an additional 1-year add-on if they want to take it with Yuki Tsunoda. Moving on to 19th place, we have Nikita Mazepin on $1 million a year. And actually, he's on the same money as his teammate in the Haas in Mick Schumacher. The only difference is that Nikita Mazepin's contract is up at the end of 2022. Mick Schumacher's is also up at the end of 2022, but Ferrari have first refusal if he is going to move to a different team. So if we are going to see Mick Schumacher move, and if there is a spot open at Ferrari, then Ferrari have the choice to bring in Mick Schumacher before everybody else. Obviously, him being a junior driver of the team. Another driver who is paid £1 million for this season is Guan Yu Zhao. He is in the Alfa Romeo seat, the rookie, on the same pay as the rookies from the previous season. That's why I feel like it's a little bit harsh on Yuki Tsunoda, that he's, below all of the other rookies that came through with him. Kimi Räikkönen, though, was on $10 million last year, so a little bit of a pay cut coming in for Guan Yu Zhao compared to the driver that he replaced. And then the final driver on $1 million this year is Latifi, and I was a little bit surprised by this. I thought, the amount of money and the amount of exposure that he brings to Williams, the fact that he's been there a little while, I thought he might have been on a little bit more than $1 million by now, especially considering his teammate in Alex Albon is on $2 million a year. Whoever got Alex Albon's contract sorted at Williams, they did a grand job managing to slot him in at $2 million a year. And also, a plus 1 year contract extension is on the table with Williams, but then there's also the links back to Red Bull, and again, Red Bull have first refusal on Alex Albon if they want to bring him back into the setup if Williams decide that they don't want him moving forward into 2023. And all of those drivers are out of contract at the end of the year. I think most of them will probably stay on in Formula 1. There's a few ifs, buts, and maybes in there, but I can see why those guys are at the bottom of this list. They're either very new to Formula 1, rookies last season or this season, or, they're settling into Formula 1 again after having been out for a little while in the case of Alex Albon. And then Latifi is kind of the odd one out in there. He's been in there a couple of years now, maybe has a pay rise on the cards in the future, next sort of contract if that comes along for 2023. But for now, settles in with those guys at the back of the pack. We then take quite a considerable jump forward, actually, to the middle of the pack. And the first of those drivers is Pierre Gasly, is on $5 million a year. All you need to do is win a race, apparently, and you just get that bump up in pay from the 1 to 2 million range all the way up to 5 million. And as we know, his contract is up at the end of 2023. But I think personally he should be trying to move at the end of 2022. We also have Ocon, who is on a $5 million contract. Obviously signed a brand new contract in the 2021 season just before Monaco, or was it around about the Monaco Grand Prix? He's signed up until 2024, so quite a long contract for Ocon in the Alpine. They obviously have, him set in that team for a little while, and then Alonso is probably going to be the driver that moves out of the Alpine team to let in the likes of Piastri. We also have Lando Norris, who is on the longest contract of anybody on the grid. He is on a $5 million contract with McLaren every single year until 2025. and they have an additional year on there if they want to extend that by a year too. So Lando Norris definitely bringing in the big bucks for the foreseeable future and will be with McLaren for a considerably long time as well. And rounding out the $5 million drivers is actually George Russell has taken a massive jump in wages. He was on $1 million at Williams last season. He is now on $5 million a year at Mercedes, has that contract up until 2023 and stepping into a brand new team. We talked about George Russell in the last video. I think has really high potential, a really high ceiling, and I'm glad, he's been pushed up there and has those similar contracts to Norris, to Gasly. I think he's in that same realms, and we could see him really step up this season and take that Mercedes by the horns and really drag it through. But I think it's interesting that, we've got the likes of Gasly and Ocon, obviously race winners now. I think Russell will be a race winner by the end of 2022. I also think Norris will be a race winner by the end of 2022. So you're in that sort of $5 million zone with them. We then take another little jump forward to Sergio Perez, who is on $8 million a year at Red Bull. And I think that's what you get for experience. I think as we sort of move up the grid a little bit, you're going to realize that it's some of these guys that have been around and done it for quite a long time. Sergio Perez now over 10 years in Formula One, obviously was with Force India / Racing Point for the majority of that, came through at Sauber. He's been there, done it, seen everything, and has slowly ground his way up to this £8 million pay packet, but obviously brings in so much money from Mexico as well. So I think it's kind of balanced out. His contract ends at the end of 2022. And then I thought it was quite interesting that Sergio Perez is only on $8 million. I don't know whether Sergio Perez maybe took a little bit of a pay cut when he was dropped from the Racing Point team, but Lance Stroll is on $10 million a year. And I think personally I'd put Stroll more on the level of the likes of, your Ocons or your Gaslys maybe, although I massively rate Gasly over Stroll now I'm saying this. I think Stroll and Ocon are in a similar sort of level for me at this moment in time, although I'd actually say Ocon's even better. It's weird to find Stroll here. I don't really see how he's, considered more expensive than the likes of Russell, Norris, Ocon, Gasly in that £5 million. He's definitely not double as good as some of those guys in the £5 million bracket. So him at 10 million, maybe it's got something to do with the fact that his dad owns the team. Just speculating. Not facts, just speculating. And then we sort of move on to the other drivers on £10 million. So we've got Valtteri Bottas is actually on $10 million a year. He is going to be moving into that Alfa Romeo seat and taking over the pay packet of Kimi Räikkönen. And I thought it was interesting, actually. The Mercedes only paid Bottas £10 million last year, so he hasn't taken any kind of pay cut. He has literally just moved teams and will be taking up that sort of senior role in the Alfa Romeo team moving forward. And the third and final driver on £10 million a year is Carlos Sainz. His contract is up at the end of 2022, and I've talked about this considerably because they need to sign him up for longer. I don't know what he needs to do to get a longer contract. Whether he deserves a pay rise, I think he's in and around the kind of area you'd expect him to be. Bottas has been around a lot longer. I think he's much better than Stroll, who's also on 10 million a year, and maybe could be bumped up into that next pay bracket that we're going to talk about in a moment's time. But I think Carlos Sainz definitely needs a little bit of a boost in pay and definitely a longer contract with Ferrari moving forward. But there are guys at 10 million. So Stroll, with his contract at Aston Martin, actually is an open contract. I didn't mention that as well. It's an open, rolling contract he has with Aston Martin. It doesn't really have an end date, but also doesn't have a particular date that it started either. It just sort of continually rolls on year, and if they want him to stay in the team, he just can. Valtteri Bottas' contract comes up at 2025, so a long contract for Bottas at Alfa Romeo. They've obviously got, their sights set on this new era and Bottas sort of driving that forward for the next few years. And as I said, Carlos Sainz coming to an end at the end of 2022. Need to sign him up. His teammate, though, Charles Leclerc, on slightly more, $12 million a year. And his contract still doesn't end until 2024. I know Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc had fairly even races last year, but Charles Leclerc, the fact that he is signed up to 2024 and they haven't extended Carlos Sainz's contract yet does confuse me a little bit. I think they've got such a perfect partnership there. They need to get both of them signed up. But obviously Charles Leclerc had that super long contract, was it 5 years at Ferrari, signing on for $12 million. I don't blame him, to be honest with you. That seems like a fairly reasonable amount of money to drive a Formula One car for a living. That just sounds perfect. Moving up a level then, and again, these last 5 drivers are kind of our veterans of the grid, minus one of these, which might surprise you a little bit, because we haven't talked about one of the sort of younger drivers on the grid yet. Daniel Ricciardo slots in at 5th place with $15 million a year, and his contract is up at the end of 2023 with an additional year if he wants it, and McLaren obviously want it too, but is he worth 3 times as much as Lando Norris? Looking at 2022, I would argue maybe not. Let me just pop this up. Have a little read. Lando Norris, 160 points without a win. Ricciardo, 115 with that Monza win. Is he worth 3 times as much to the team? Maybe in the background. Obviously has lots of experience in Formula One, but I'd love to know your thoughts on that in the comments down below. Maybe that's just the McLaren fan in me that sort of found that one the most interesting, the fact that Daniel Ricciardo is paid 3 times as much as Lando Norris. Moving forward, Aston Martin. Again, we've got Sebastian Vettel on $15 million a year. His contract is up at the end of 2022, although Aston Martin have put in a clause where they can have an additional year on top of that if they both agree to the terms. But I feel like this is where we are at with Sebastian Vettel. He definitely deserves to be up there in terms of the pay packets. He brings so much experience. He's a 4-time world champion. He brings so much eyes to Aston Martin. Personally, if Aston Martin had another driver that wasn't Vettel in there, would I pay anywhere near as much attention to Aston Martin? Probably not. And I think that's the case for lots and lots of fans across the globe. So he probably brings in quite a considerable amount to the team. Jumping up then to another very experienced driver, and a driver that I think will probably leave at the end of this year, is Fernando Alonso on $20 million a year. I know that Alpine really wanted to get him back in the car, obviously, after Daniel Ricciardo exited from what was the Renault team then, but they have put a chunk of money into bringing Fernando Alonso back, and last year he was phenomenal. I really enjoyed watching Fernando Alonso. Worth every penny of that 20 million? Maybe. It's very difficult to put a judge on whether or not a driver is worth $20 million, because that is just an insane amount of money. But that contract ends at 2022, and I think we will see Alonso bow out gracefully again from Formula One and maybe come back in the future again. You just never seem to know of these drivers. Kimi came back, Alonso came back. Maybe there'll be one more swan song from Alonso in the future, because he has just been so good last season and would definitely deserve his place back on the grid. And now, you might have noticed that the 2 drivers we've got less to talk about are the 2 drivers that were at the top of the tree in the Drivers' Championship last year, Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton. Both of them actually have contracts until 2023, so we could see those guys battling it out for another couple of years together. Max Verstappen is so young compared to the likes of Alonso and Vettel and Ricciardo, and yet he is paid $25 million. It just goes to show that Red Bull really have some money behind them, don't they? They have so much cash that Max Verstappen alone is paid more than Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz combined. He is paid more than Daniel Ricciardo and Bottas combined. He is paid more than all of the junior drivers on the grid. So sort of Ocon backwards down the grid, he is paid more than all of those combined. It is insane to me. I know he is a world champion, but that is a hell of a pay packet for a very, very young Max Verstappen. And of course, I think we could all guess that top of the tree was going to be Mr. Lewis Hamilton himself with an eye-watering $40 million contract. I know he signed a new deal in 2021. I didn't realise that he had a 2-year contract that was $40 million a year. I know he is a 7-time world champion. I know he's won 100 races. He's got over 100 pole positions. He is a phenomenon of Formula One. But my goodness me, he has paid nearly more than half the grid combined. It is a staggering amount of money that Lewis Hamilton brings in every single year, and he must be worth it. He must be worth it to Mercedes. Otherwise, they wouldn't put that money on the table. And I can definitely see why he would be worth it. As I said, just one of the greatest drivers we will see in this era. And to hold on to him for 2 more years, even though they've given him a $10 million increase in pay since 2021 for 2022 and 2023, I sort of agree with it. I feel like 40 million, fair enough. Just give him what he wants to get 2 more years out of Lewis Hamilton, which seems very strange to say considering, we're looking at $40 million, which is just insane. But here is the rankings then, all the way from Yuki Tsunoda, who doesn't even earn $1 million a year, up to Lewis Hamilton on $40 million. Do you agree with this listings? Who would you maybe swap around a little bit? I think there's a few in there for me that I'd personally, swap around a little bit, give a boost to a couple of little drivers, although it depends on the team that they're in as well. But I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments down below. Who's overpaid and who is criminally underpaid? I think we can say Yuki Tsunoda should maybe be that one. The fact that he is the only driver not making $1 million and yet has so much potential is just crazy to me. But that's just my thoughts. Thank you guys so much for watching. Leave a like, subscribe if you are new to the channel. We're trying to get up to 7,000 subscribers. We've obviously got a couple of months until lights out in the first race of the season. We'll be covering all of the livery drops, all of the 2022 car reveals over the coming weeks. Thank you again, and I will see you next time.